Picture Vienna in 1865, within the confines of a dim, damp asylum where the air hung heavy with the scent of disinfectants and decay. A man in his 50s, hair disheveled, eyes burning with a near-divine obsession, beats desperately against a locked iron door. He screams into the empty corridor, "Wash your hands. You must wash your hands. The killer is hidden right between your fingers." The guards pass by with cold sneers. No one believes the ramblings of this madman, and even his colleagues are convinced his mind has finally withered. Yet, in the decades following his death, doctors across the globe would honor his plea before every surgery, a practice that caused human life expectancy to leap by an entire decade. His name was Ignaz Semmelweis. Tonight, by the soft pulse of the hearth, let us journey through his true life with this story, one you need not labor to remember. He was the savior of mothers, yet also the most tragic prophet in the history of medicine. Behind a fate of misunderstanding, exile, and an eventual flickering out in solitude, lies a glow of humanity, intensely lucid and profoundly painful. In the quiet of the night, let us slowly unveil the mystery of this medical martyr's destiny, a fate as cold as moonlight, yet as searing as fresh blood. Semmelweis's life seemed etched with a mark of displacement, from the moment he stepped into the Vienna General Hospital in 1846. As the first assistant in the maternity clinic, he was confronted not by the joy of new life, but by the looming shadow of death. In the hospital's first division, 1 in every 10 mothers perished from the dreaded childbed fever. The agonizing fevers caused mothers to writhe in convulsions, yet the authorities of the day dismissed it as the result of miasma, cosmic imbalances, or even the psychological fragility of the women themselves. Semmelweis, a man of profound sensitivity, could not bear the harrowing screams of the dying. They echoed in his ears day and night. He began to pore over records in the dead of night, discovering a startling anomaly. The second division, run by midwives, had a mortality rate significantly lower than the first division, which was staffed by the medical elite. This stark contrast was like a thorn driven into his logically meticulous mind. To him, medicine was not a display of prestige, but a desperate guard over the dignity of every life. During those days consumed by anxiety, he became the most unwelcome man in the hospital, for he dared to hurl uncomfortable questions at the titans of medicine while they socialized in comfort. The revelation of truth often arrives through an accident of profound fate. In 1847, Semmelweis's close friend, Dr. Jacob Kolechka, accidentally punctured his finger during an autopsy. Days later, he died with symptoms identical to childbed fever. In that moment, Semmelweis's worldview collapsed, replaced by a blinding, inescapable truth. The doctors who had just been handling putrid corpses in the dissection room were carrying cadaverous particles directly on their hands into the delivery rooms, reaching toward vulnerable mothers. Their noble hands, supposedly dedicated to healing, were in fact the couriers of death's invitation. This discovery did more than challenge medical common sense. It wounded the towering ego of the elite. Semmelweis bypassed diplomatic persuasion, demanding that all doctors scrub their hands in a chlorinated lime solution before touching a patient. It was a foul-smelling liquid that could burn the skin, yet a miracle followed. In less than a month, the mortality rate plummeted from 18% to a staggering 1%. For the first time, the ward once filled with wails was bathed in a long, serene stillness. Standing at the end of the corridor, watching the mothers sleep in peace, Semmelweis felt a rare tranquility, unaware that the war over hygiene had only just begun its most brutal chapter. However, a gentle discovery could not quell the fires of arrogant rage. The medical establishment felt profoundly humiliated. To the prominent physicians of Vienna, admitting that the hands of doctors are dirty was tantamount to admitting they were murderers. His superior, Professor Klein, led the resistance against the handwashing mandate, eventually using political maneuvering to revoke Semmelweis's teaching post. Under the crushing weight of power, the truth appeared fragile, and former friends chose betrayal or silence in the pursuit of prestige. Semmelweis was forced to take his diamond-clear evidence and flee Vienna, returning to his hometown of Budapest. Over the next decade there, he became nearly a patron saint of the city, maintaining incredibly low mortality rates in his wards, yet he grew increasingly erratic and isolated. Deep into the night, he penned furious open letters, branding doctors who refused to wash as collective murderers. His language became sharp and uncontrollable. He even began to hallucinate, feeling as though the blood of the innocent was still clinging to his own fingernails. This extreme sense of justice, deprived of social validation for so long, began to ruthlessly gnaw at his mental defenses. He would pace the streets of Budapest, accosting pregnant women and imploring them to demand their doctors wash their hands, an act that seemed insane to onlookers, but was in fact the most desperate cry of a lucid soul. In 1865, under the guise of taking him on a holiday, Semmelweis's wife and close friends conspired to lure him into a Vienna asylum. As he crossed that heavy iron threshold and realized the betrayal, the final remnants of his sanity shattered. He fought to escape, only to be savagely beaten by the guards. In a twist of cruel irony, his right middle finger was injured during the struggle, and the very bacteria he had spent his life fighting invaded his bloodstream through the wound. Just 2 weeks later, the man who had dedicated his life to saving mothers died from the very affliction he knew best: systemic sepsis triggered by gangrene. On his deathbed, lying on a cold iron frame, he stared at his own hands, blackened and swollen with infection, and his eyes held a glimmer of liberation. When he passed, the Viennese medical journals carried only a brief, dismissive obituary, and his funeral was attended by only a handful of relatives. The mind that redefined human hygiene was extinguished quietly in an absurd silence. With his own body, he provided the final and most harrowing experimental proof of the link between hand-washing and infection. 20 years after Semmelweis's death, Louis Pasteur discovered bacteria, and Joseph Lister refined antisepsis. When future generations reopened the book of history, they were struck with horror to realize that long before the breakthrough, one man had stood alone in the wilderness, crying out for half a lifetime. Today, a statue stands in Budapest with an inscription on its pedestal: "The Savior of Mothers." He answered the question posed at the start: the price of truth is high, but there are always those willing to become martyrs so that the world might later live in light and cleanliness. His life was a struggle unto death between truth and lies, a painfully slow awakening of human civilization. Our story for tonight has ended. I hope the stubborn sincerity of Semmelweis brings you some measure of solace in the deep of the night. In this world, some rules are cold, but human conscience is forever warm. Now, release all your thoughts. Let your mind be like a freshly washed cloth, drifting lightly onto the shores of a dream-filled lake. In that place, there is no strife, no sickness, only the clearest peace. Good night.